He left her because she could not give him what a wife should. On the night Serena Caldwell became a bride, the dream shattered. Every touch burned. Every attempt at closeness ended in agony, and Damien Hale, her billionaire husband, went from patient to cold to gone. Weeks after their vows, she was served with divorce papers, like a business deal voided for defect. Shamed, heartbroken, and silenced by pain, Serena let him go, but she didn't tell him the one thing that could have changed everything. She was already carrying his child. For years, she rebuilt herself in shadows, raising a daughter he never met. Until fate, and one fatal mistake, brings Damien crashing back into her world. Now he wants answers. He wants her. But can a man who left at her weakest handle the truth that never left? Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Serena left the city of bright lights and broken promises. She returned to Atlanta, carrying more than a suitcase. She carried a child inside her. Her family looked at her with questions she could not answer. Friends whispered behind her back. She had no courage to explain the shame of being divorced so quickly, of being abandoned because her body had failed her. She walked the streets alone, holding her belly, praying for strength. Nights were the hardest. Silence pressed against her walls. Memories of Damien's cold stare haunted her. The words he left her with, "Not enough, never enough," burned deep. Every day she grew weaker, yet she kept moving. She painted small sketches to earn a little money. She ate less, saving food for the child who was not yet born. She whispered lullabies into the dark, telling the life inside her that they would survive. Her world was stripped of comfort, stripped of trust. Yet she held on. A mother with nothing but pain, guilt, and the hope that the child in her womb would give her a reason to keep breathing. The day came like a storm. Serena was rushed to the hospital, her body shaking with pain. The doctor's voice was urgent. The delivery would be dangerous. Her heart pounded with fear. Through hours of agony, she thought of giving up, but then she remembered. This was not only her fight. A fragile life depended on her. She gripped the sheets, tears streaming down her face, begging God to let her hold her child. Her screams filled the room. Her body almost collapsed. For a moment, she saw darkness, as if life itself was leaving her. But then, a cry. A piercing cry that split through the silence. Alara was born. Tiny, fragile, yet full of life. Serena gathered the baby to her chest, trembling. She pressed her lips to the soft forehead, crying harder than before. The pain was not gone. The scars were not healed. But in her arms was proof that something good had survived the wreckage. Serena had lost her husband, her dignity, and her place in the world. But in that moment, she had gained the only treasure that mattered, her daughter. Far away in San Francisco, Damien Hale was living another life. His empire was expanding. Towers of glass rose under his name. His face appeared on magazine covers. The Golden CEO, they called him. He stood in conference rooms with walls of steel and light, commanding respect. He closed deals worth millions, shaking hands with the most powerful men in America. Cameras followed him. Reporters praised him. He had everything that money and fame could buy. But at night, he was alone. Success filled his schedule but emptied his soul. He convinced himself that the divorce had been the right decision, that cutting Serena out was strength, not weakness. He buried the memory of her tears, of that night when she pushed him away in pain. To the world, Damien was unstoppable. To himself, he was a man haunted by questions he refused to ask. Yet the applause was louder than the silence inside him. He built higher. He ran faster. He told himself he had won. But destiny has a way of bringing shadows back into the light. And the shadow of Serena, and the child he never knew, was waiting. Back in Atlanta, years slipped away. Serena poured her heart into raising Alara. The girl's laughter filled the small apartment. Her drawings covered the walls. Her eyes, clear, blue, and piercing, were the same as Damien's. Neighbors adored the child. Teachers said she was bright, curious, and kind. To Serena, she was everything. A reason to wake each morning. A reason to fight through exhaustion. But every smile carried a hidden ache. Serena saw in her daughter the man who had abandoned her. She never spoke his name, yet his presence lived in Alara's face. At night, Serena would tuck her daughter into bed and sit by the window, staring at the stars. She wondered if Damien ever thought of her, if he ever wondered what became of the woman he left behind. She told herself it was better this way, safer. But deep down, guilt gnawed at her. Alara had a father she deserved to know. The little girl would sometimes ask, "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy?" Serena's heart cracked each time. She would smile and say, "You have me, sweetheart, and that's enough." But in her silence, she knew it was not enough. It was a quiet Sunday. Serena took Alara to Central Park. The trees were alive with color, the sound of children's laughter carried in the air. For once, Serena felt at peace. Alara skipped ahead, chasing a pigeon. Then she stopped suddenly, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Her voice was soft but curious. "Mommy, why is that man staring at us?" Serena followed her daughter's gaze. A man stood by the fountain. Tall, poised, dressed in a tailored suit. His eyes were locked on them. Eyes that Serena had not seen in 5 years. Eyes that once looked at her with love and then with coldness. Her breath caught in her chest. Damien Hale. The man who had abandoned her. The man who had never known his daughter. Alara tilted her head, studying him. The resemblance was undeniable. Those same blue eyes, that same sharp jawline. The child's curiosity was innocent, but Serena's heart thundered with fear. She grabbed Alara's hand tightly, whispering, "Don't look, sweetheart, let's go." But the truth could not be hidden. The past had found them in the middle of a park, under the open sky. Serena turned quickly, pulling Alara away. Her steps were fast, almost desperate, but behind her she felt it, the weight of his stare. Damien was frozen in place, unable to breathe. He had seen the child, a little girl with eyes that mirrored his own. It was like looking into a reflection of a life he had never known. His chest tightened. His world, built on wealth and power, trembled for the first time. Serena kept walking, her grip on Alara firm. Her hands shook, her mind raced. She could not let him come closer, not here, not now. Damien finally moved, a single step forward, but he stopped. No words left his mouth. He watched her disappear into the crowd, the child's small hand clasped in hers. The silence said everything. Recognition, shock, questions that burned but remained unspoken. Serena's heart pounded. She whispered to herself, "He can't know. Not like this." Yet, deep inside, she knew the moment had come. Their lives had collided again, and nothing would remain hidden. Days later, Serena found an envelope in her mailbox. Heavy, embossed, sealed with gold. Her hands trembled as she read the names, Damien Hale and Vivian Ross. The wedding would take place in Napa Valley. Elegant, lavish, a union celebrated in the press, praised by society. Serena sat at her kitchen table, staring at the invitation. Lara hummed softly while coloring nearby, unaware of the storm inside her mother. Memories flooded back. Damien's face, the way he looked at them in the park. He had seen Alara. He must have known, or at least suspected. Should she go? Should she face him, risk the truth spilling out in front of strangers? Her pride screamed no, but her heart whispered yes, not for herself, but for her daughter. She folded the card shut, holding it against her chest. After long hours of silence, she whispered, "We'll go." Serena had nothing to offer but the truth, and the truth had waited too long to be told. The morning of the wedding arrived with a heavy sky. Serena dressed Alara in a soft white dress. She chose a plain navy gown for herself, nothing that would draw attention. She stood before the mirror, adjusting her hair. Her reflection carried 5 years of pain and resilience. She looked older, yet stronger. Still, doubt gnawed at her heart. Alara twirled happily, innocent of what the day meant. Serena smiled faintly, but inside she was torn. Why was she going? To confront Damien? To show him the daughter he had left unknowingly? Or to release the weight of her secret once and for all? Her suitcase was small, just enough for a night in Napa Valley. She packed Alara's favorite toy, a stuffed rabbit worn at the seams. As they boarded the bus, Serena's hands shook around her ticket. She whispered a silent prayer, that the journey would bring closure, not more pain. The road stretched ahead, winding through hills and vineyards. Serena gazed out the window, torn between fear and hope. Napa Valley glowed in the afternoon sun. The vineyard stretched like a sea of green, leading to a mansion of stone and glass. Guests in silk gowns and tuxedos gathered, their laughter ringing through the air. Serena walked through the gates, holding Alara's hand. Her dress was modest among the jewels and pearls around her. She felt eyes on her, whispers brushing against her shoulders. She was a shadow in a world of wealth. Inside, chandeliers sparkled above rows of white roses. Musicians played soft strings. The air carried the scent of expensive wine and roses. It was a palace of dreams. a symbol of Damien's success. Alara's eyes widened in wonder. She tugged her mother's sleeve, smiling. Serena forced a small smile in return, though her stomach twisted. Every corner reminded her of the life she had lost. The man she once called husband was about to bind himself to another woman. Serena whispered to herself, "Stay strong." She gripped Alara's hand tighter. The stage was set for a collision she could no longer avoid. The music swelled as the ceremony began. Guests turned their eyes toward the aisle, waiting for Vivienne Ross, radiant in her gown. Serena stood near the back, clutching Alara's hand tightly. But in one unguarded moment, Alara slipped free. Her small shoes tapped against the marble floor as she ran forward. Her voice rang out, clear and innocent. "Daddy?" The word cut through the air like thunder. Every violin string seemed to stop. Every whisper froze. Damien turned his head sharply. He saw the little girl standing before him, blue eyes wide and shining. A hush fell over the hall. Guests exchanged startled looks, their gazes darting between Serena and Damien. Serena's face went pale. She stepped forward, desperate to pull her daughter back, but it was too late. The word had been spoken. The secret, long buried, had escaped into the open. Lara tilted her head, smiling as only a child could. She did not understand the silence or the shock. She only saw a man who looked just like her, and for the first time she gave him the name she had always wondered about. Damien's heart pounded. The sound of his own pulse filled his ears. He looked down at the child, her face, her eyes, her smile. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. "Is she mine?" The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. His voice trembled, breaking the calm mask he wore so well. No one answered. The guests stared in silence, waiting. His chest tightened. Questions collided in his mind. 5 years lost, 5 years gone. How could Serena have kept this from him? He looked at Alara again. Her small hands, the curve of her chin. There was no doubt. The truth was in her features. His own blood stared back at him. Serena stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached for Alara. Damien's gaze locked with hers. His voice grew louder, filled with desperation. "Tell me, is she mine?" The air was heavy. No music, no laughter, only the weight of truth pressing against them all. The billionaire who had once felt untouchable now stood trembling, undone by the innocence of a child. Serena's lips quivered. She had carried the secret for years, but she could not run anymore. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "She's 5, born 7 months after you left." The words echoed through the hall. Gasps spread among the guests. Some covered their mouths. Others leaned closer, whispering the revelation from ear to ear. Damien's face drained of color. He took a step back as if struck. His mind reeled. The timing was undeniable. The truth stood in front of him in the shape of a little girl. Serena gathered Alara into her arms, holding her close. Her voice was unsteady, but strong enough to be heard. "I tried to tell you. You never listened. You shut me out. You left me with nothing but her." The silence grew heavy again, broken only by Alara's quiet breath against her mother's shoulder. The confession could not be taken back. It was no longer a secret between two broken lovers. It was truth exposed in front of 100 eyes. And there, in that hall of roses and chandeliers, Serena's pain became undeniable. Vivienne Ross stood frozen at the front of the aisle. Her veil shimmered in the light, but her eyes were clouded with shock. She looked from Damien to Serena, then to the little girl clinging to her mother's dress. The resemblance was too strong to deny. Pain welled in her chest. She had planned this day for months. She had dreamed of walking into Damien's life as his equal, his partner, his future. But now the past had risen, tearing through her dream. Still, she did not scream. She did not throw the bouquet or storm away. She held her breath, her heart aching. Her eyes searched Damien's face for answers, but he had none. Her gaze returned to Serena. No anger, no hatred, only sorrow for a woman who had once been in her place and for the child caught in between. Vivienne's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The silence between the three women was louder than any shout. Her world was cracking, yet she stood still, watching a truth she could never unsee. The hall erupted in whispers. Guests leaned toward each other, shocked, curious, unsettled. The perfect ceremony had turned into a storm. Damien stood rigid, his eyes on Serena and Alara. He could not move. He could not breathe. The weight of the revelation pressed against him harder than any business empire ever had. Serena clutched her daughter, ready to flee. But Vivian stepped forward. Her voice was calm, though her hands trembled. "Stop!" The music halted completely. The officiant lowered his book. All eyes turned to her. Vivian looked at Damien, her face pale, but her tone steady. "We cannot go on. Not like this." Her words cut through the hall. Gasps followed. Some guests nodded in agreement, others stared in disbelief. The marriage that was meant to begin had already ended before it could be spoken. Damien turned toward her, but she shook her head gently. "You have a daughter. Be a father first." The crowd buzzed louder. The wedding of the season had collapsed under the weight of a single truth. And for Serena, the secret she had hidden so long had torn open the world once again. The hall was still buzzing with whispers when Damien finally stepped forward. His eyes burned with anger, confusion, and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice rose, echoing against the marble walls. "Why did you keep her from me?" Serena held Alara close. Her shoulders trembled, but she lifted her head to face him. "You never let me explain," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her words were clear. "You divorced me and blocked me. You shut every door. How could I reach you?" Damien's fists clenched. He wanted to deny it, but her words struck deep. He remembered his own rage, his refusal to listen, the cold silence he forced between them. The guests leaned in, their eyes locked on the broken couple. This was no longer a wedding. It was the unraveling of a story buried for years. Serena's tears glistened, falling onto Alara's hair. "I carried her alone. I carried the shame alone. You left me with nothing but my pain and my child." Damien's chest heaved. For the first time, the powerful man stood powerless, his empire meaningless before the truth he had ignored. Serena's voice grew steadier, though her body shook. She looked directly at Damien, forcing him to hear what he once refused. "That night, the night you hated me for, it wasn't rejection. It was pain. My body was tearing inside. I have endometriosis." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Few understood the word, but everyone felt the weight in her tone. Damien froze. His mind replayed that night, her flinches, her tears, her desperate apologies. He had thought it was an excuse, a lie to avoid intimacy. "You never asked," Serena continued, her voice breaking. "You never saw the hospital visits. You never saw the nights I couldn't even stand without crying. You just decided I failed you as a wife." Damien staggered back a step. The truth hit harder than any blow. His pride had blinded him. His impatience had destroyed them. For years he carried bitterness. Now shame flooded in its place. He whispered, almost to himself, "All this time, I never knew." The silence of the hall grew heavy. Serena's secret was no longer hers alone. It stood naked before the man who once abandoned her, and the world that now listened. Damien's gaze fell to the floor. His heart pounded with memories he had buried. He saw himself again, in their first weeks of marriage, pacing the room, hurling cruel words. "You tricked me. You made vows you couldn't keep." He saw Serena's face then, pale and broken, begging for patience he never gave. His mind spiraled through flashbacks, the slammed doors, the icy nights when he slept alone by choice, too proud to comfort her. The day he placed the divorce papers before her without a single word of kindness. Shame crushed him. His empire of glass towers, his name in golden headlines, they all meant nothing now. What mattered was the woman he had destroyed, the child he had never known. His lips parted, but no defense came. Only regret. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I was blind. I was cruel, and I can't take it back." The hall was silent. For once, Damien Hale, the untouchable billionaire, looked small. Not because of money, not because of failure in business, but because he had failed as a husband and as a man. Serena turned her face away. She had waited years for this moment. Yet hearing his regret brought no triumph, only more pain. All eyes turned to Vivian. She stood still, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Her heart ached with betrayal, yet also with clarity. She looked at Damien, then at Serena, and finally at Alara. The child's face was pure, untouched by the bitterness of adults. Vivian inhaled deeply. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall. "You need to be a father first." The words fell like a stone in water, rippling through every guest. The ceremony that had begun with music and flowers ended with truth and resignation. Damien's head turned sharply toward her. "Vivian." But she raised her hand gently. There was no rage in her eyes, only strength. "This marriage cannot start on broken ground," she said. "You have a daughter. She needs you more than I ever could." The officiant closed his book. Guests shifted uneasily, murmurs rising like waves. The wedding was over. Vivian lowered her bouquet. Tears threatened, but she stood tall. She would not fight for a man divided by guilt. She would not build her life on secrets. Serena stared at her in shock. Arrival had become something unexpected, a voice of dignity in the ruins of the day. The hall had emptied slowly, leaving only whispers behind. Serena gathered her belongings, preparing to leave with Alara. But the little girl tugged at her sleeve. Her eyes were wide, searching, innocent. "Mommy," she asked softly, "is he really my daddy?" Serena froze. Her throat tightened. Tears welled in her eyes. She pulled Alara into her arms, holding her close. "Yes," she whispered through trembling lips. "He is your daddy." Alara's small hands wrapped around her mother's neck. Her voice was filled with wonder. "Then why don't we live with him? Why didn't he come before?" Serena's heart shattered. She could not explain betrayal, or pride, or the sickness that had stolen their chance. She kissed her daughter's hair and whispered, "Because sometimes people make mistakes, but you are not one of them. You are the best thing I ever had." From across the hall, Damien watched. His chest ached at the child's words, at the longing in her voice. For the first time, he felt the weight of fatherhood pressing into his soul. Alara's innocent question had pierced deeper than any accusation. The truth was no longer about the past. It was about the future waiting for them all. The wedding hall was empty now, but Damien's resolve grew heavier with every heartbeat. He approached Serena cautiously, his voice low. "Please," he said, eyes fixed on Alara. "Let me see her. Let me be part of her life." Serena stiffened. Her arms tightened around Alara's shoulders. The memory of papers sliding across a cold table haunted her. She had carried the pain alone for years. Could she trust him now? "You left me once," she whispered, her voice raw. "You walked away when I needed you most." Damien's jaw tightened. He could not deny it. He had been blind, proud, cruel, but now he saw the truth standing before him, a little girl who deserved more than excuses. "I cannot change the past," he said slowly, "but I can fight for the future. For her." His hand trembled as he reached toward Alara, not touching, only waiting. Serena hesitated. Doubt filled her chest, but Alara's curious eyes looked between them, innocent and searching. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. For the first time, Serena allowed Damien to step closer. The first stone in a long road to redemption had been laid. The next day, Damien sat in Serena's small Atlanta apartment. It was a world far from his glass towers and private jets. He watched Alara play quietly with her stuffed rabbit, her eyes cautious. He tried to smile. "Hi, Alara." His voice was gentle, uncertain. She looked at him, then turned away, pressing the toy to her chest. Her lips moved, but no word came. Damien's heart twisted. He had faced boardrooms filled with ruthless men, had conquered markets across continents. Yet here, before a 5-year-old girl, he felt powerless. Serena sat nearby, watching carefully. Her guard was up. She studied every move, every word, ready to shield her daughter if needed. "Would you like me to read to you?" Damien asked, holding out a brightly colored book. Lara glanced at it but shook her head. She curled closer to her mother. The rejection cut deep. He longed to hear one word, "Dad," but it did not come. Lara's silence was a wall he could not break in a day. He had lost 5 years. Trust could not be won in 5 minutes. Still, Damien stayed. For the first time in his life, he chose patience over pride. It was a rainy afternoon. Alara sat on the rug, crayons scattered around her. A book lay untouched beside her. The Starry Bunny, illustrated by Serena years ago. Damien picked it up carefully. "Your mommy drew these pictures," he said softly. He began to read, his voice steady, unfamiliar, yet warm. At first, Alara kept her eyes down, but as the story unfolded, her curiosity grew. She peeked at the pages, tracing the drawings with her tiny fingers. Damien's voice carried the tale of a lonely bunny who found light in the darkest sky. When he lifted his eyes, Alara was watching him. For the first time she smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but real. Serena's breath caught. She had not seen that smile aimed at another adult in years. Damien noticed too. His chest swelled, not with pride but with fragile hope. Alara leaned closer, her laughter bubbling as he exaggerated the bunny's voice. For a moment, the pain between past and present faded. In that simple story, father and daughter found their first bridge. Not built on grand gestures, but on pages and laughter shared in the quiet of a rainy day. Serena watched the scene unfold, her daughter laughing with the man who once shattered her. A knot tightened in her chest. Part of her wanted to believe in this change, to see Damien's hand steady as he turned the pages, to see Alara's eyes sparkle in trust. It was what she had dreamed of for years. But fear whispered louder. What if he left again? What if this new closeness was only temporary? Could she let her child love him, only to see her heart broken later? Serena's memories pulled her back. Hospital nights, pain that left her unable to move, and the silence of an empty bed. She remembered the cold signature that ended their marriage. Could a man who once abandoned her truly become a father now? She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside. For Alara's sake, she wanted to try, but the risk felt unbearable. When Damien looked up and caught her gaze, she quickly turned away. Her tears burned. She could not let him see how fragile her hope still was. Between love and fear, Serena stood torn, watching the man who had once been her husband try to win the child she had raised alone. Weeks later, Damien faced a choice. A billion-dollar merger awaited him in New York. Every advisor urged him to stay, to secure the deal. It would cement his empire, expand his reach, but his heart was in Atlanta, with Alara, with Serena. He closed the folder, ignoring the shocked stares of his board. "Cancel the trip," he said firmly. "I have somewhere more important to be." That night, he appeared at Serena's door. Rain clung to his suit, his eyes tired but determined. Alara's face lit up when she saw him, her rabbit in hand. "You came back," she whispered. Damien knelt before her, voice breaking. "I will always come back." Serena stood in the doorway, speechless. This was not the man she remembered, the man who chose power over people. This was someone different. For the first time, she saw proof not in words, but in sacrifice. He had left millions behind for a bedtime story, for a place at the table of a small apartment. In that moment, Serena began to wonder if healing was possible, if the man who had once abandoned her could truly choose love over wealth. Spring came, soft and green. Serena, Damien, and Alara took a small trip outside the city. They spread a blanket beneath tall trees. Alara chased butterflies, her laughter echoing through the open field. Serena sat quietly, watching. Damien joined the game, his polished shoes stained with grass, his suit jacket tossed aside. For the first time he looked less like a billionaire and more like a father. Alara's joy was pure. She pulled both of them by the hands, demanding they run with her. Serena's heart ached at the sight. She wanted to believe it could last. Vivian had not vanished. She still called Damien, her voice calm, asking about Alara. There was no bitterness in her tone, only acceptance. She stepped back, yet not completely out of their lives, a reminder that healing did not always mean erasing the past. As the sun lowered, Serena watched Damien lift Alara onto his shoulders. Her daughter's smile was wide, her laughter endless. It was a picture Serena had once believed impossible, but even as hope bloomed, fear lingered. Could this fragile picture truly hold, or would it break under the weight of their history? The peace did not last. Headlines exploded across magazines and screens. Hale wedding collapse. Secret child revealed. Paparazzi crowded outside Serena's apartment. Neighbors whispered. At the grocery store, strangers stared at her as though she were a scandal, not a mother. Serena lowered her head, shielding Alara with her arms. The shame returned, sharper than before. She had survived judgment once, but now it spread across the nation. Damien, however, did not hide. He stood before cameras, his voice firm. "Serena Caldwell is the mother of my child. She deserves respect, not ridicule. And Alara is my daughter. Anyone who disrespects them disrespects me." The statement was bold, unshakable. For the first time, Damien used his power not for profit, but for protection. Still, Serena trembled. Her world was once again under fire. Yet, when she saw Damien's hand resting firmly on her shoulder, shielding her from flashing lights, a new strength stirred inside her. The scandal could not erase the truth. And for the first time, she was not facing it alone. The night after the storm, Serena stood by her window. Tears fell silently, dripping onto her hands. Damien entered quietly, his face weary but determined. "You left me when I needed you most," she said, her voice breaking. "Do you know how many nights I cried alone? Do you know what it cost me to survive?" Her words pierced the silence. Damien's knees bent. He dropped before her, a man stripped of pride. "I know," he whispered, his voice cracked. "I failed you. I failed her. Give me a chance to make it right, please." Serena's breath shook. The man who once handed her divorce papers now knelt with nothing but remorse. Lara stirred in her sleep, unaware of the storm between her parents. Serena's tears blurred her vision. She wanted to hate him forever, but the sincerity in his eyes pulled at the walls around her heart. Her silence lasted long, but finally she whispered, "Don't break her heart. Don't break mine again." It was not full forgiveness, but it was the first step toward it. Days later, the three of them sat together in the park. The air was light with the scent of blooming flowers. Alara held both their hands, swinging between them as they walked. She looked up with a smile and whispered, "We're family now, right?" Serena's heart cracked. Tears filled her eyes, but she forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart." Her voice trembled, heavy with both hope and fear. Damien squeezed Alara's tiny hand, then looked at Serena. His eyes held a silent promise. He would not run again. The moment was simple. A child, a mother, a father, walking side by side. Yet beneath it lay years of pain, regret, and fragile trust. Serena knew happiness could break as easily as glass, but for that moment she let herself feel it. Alara's innocence wrapped around them, binding wounds that once seemed unhealable. The future was uncertain, but in the small hand that joined theirs there was a chance, a fragile chance, that love could hold. The waves of Santa Monica rolled against the shore. Serena, Damien, and Alara walked barefoot across the sand. The child ran ahead, chasing seagulls, her laughter carried by the wind. Serena watched, her eyes soft with both pain and peace. Damien stepped beside her, quiet, humbled, no longer the untouchable billionaire. For the first time, he looked like a man who had found what mattered. Narrator's voice: "Money and fame can build towers. They can bring power, applause, and envy, but they cannot heal a broken heart. They cannot raise a child. They cannot replace the right to live and the right to be loved. In the end, it is love that makes us whole again." Serena and Damien called out together, and Alara ran back into their arms. The three embraced under the setting sun, shadows stretching across the golden sand. It was not a perfect ending, but it was real, a story of loss, truth, and forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to follow more journeys of healing, love, and second chances.